When this irritated stepmother left her paralyzed lizard in the forest, she thought that her husband would understand her reasons and agree with her that the girl was left all alone in a dangerous environment. But then the wild wolf noticed her and did something she never expected. Victor and Olga couldn't believe their eyes. When they saw the luggage in front of their door, it belonged to their granddaughter, but she was nowhere to be seen. They immediately became worried, not only because they were in the forest with all its dangers, but also because their granddaughter Mila was a city girl. She was unsafe, and even worse, she was in a wheelchair. What could have happened to her? They had been away all day and had no idea that the girl was coming. Where could she be? They had to find her, so they hurried to follow the tracks of her wheelchair, but then they heard a wolf growling and their blood froze in their veins. Mila could be in great danger. The couple went through a lot of very difficult things in their lives, but they couldn't even imagine that something would happen to their most loved one in the place they loved the most. It would just be devastating. As they ran through the forest in search of her, their footsteps never wavered, because they knew this place like the back of their hand. They had lived here for decades, and every stone, every twig, every leaf was forever imprinted in their memory. When young spouses Victor and Olga began their lives on their land in the forest, they could not wait for this. This place was close enough to a small village that they were not completely cut off, but still gave them the freedom and independence they craved for their growing family. They wanted to have many children and were overwhelmed with joy when their son was born. But unfortunately, something went wrong during childbirth, and the doctors told them that they would never be able to have children again. This news devastated Olga, but Victor was happy with the family they had created. His wife and son were everything to him, but for their son, their world was not enough. He hated living on a farm and in a small village with limited entertainment. Victor tried to teach him everything he knew, but he wasn't interested. He hated living in the woods and in the wild. As soon as he came of age, he went to college in the city, and when he found a job there, he hardly came home. They hardly saw him for a long time. The city was only an hour away, but it was a different world. They wanted their son to follow his dream, but hoped that there would be at least some place for them in his life. Olga missed her boy terribly, but when it became clear that he did not share her feelings, she began to pour out all her love on the little wild animals that turned out to be on her porch. She always loved taking care of animals, and in this sad time she saved them even more. Victor patiently made small bird wing splints for her or small aviaries where she could keep animals. She was filling the void left by her son, helping creatures left alone like herself. But suddenly their son called and said he wanted to come visit. That day, he brought a surprise with him, his future wife. Victor and Olga fell in love with her at first sight. She was sweet and caring, and they knew that their son would be in safe hands. However, she was also a city girl and was completely uninterested in life on the farm. It was a little sad that they didn't have anyone who could take over the farm afterwards, but they just wanted their son to be happy. For a while it looked like their son had returned to them. He had looked down on their lifestyle for so long that it was like losing a child. But now he often came with his wife, and they celebrated holidays together on the farm. The couple felt that they had a daughter, their heart and family were growing, and it was during one of these festive celebrations that they were presented with the best gift. Their son and daughter-in-law brought them to meet their newborn granddaughter Mila. Olga and Victor couldn't believe their luck. They had everything they had ever dreamed of. And as Mila grew up, she brought even more joy to all the adults in her life. Her mother wanted her to spend as much time as possible with her grandparents, who were the only ones she had, and she wanted them to have a great relationship. Therefore, she often brought her daughter to visit them, and sometimes came alone with her. When their son was at work, Mila was a wonderful girl who adored the farm and animals. When she got older, she was even allowed to visit alone, for the first time in her life, and it was then that she learned a secret. Mila and her grandparents went for a walk in the woods when suddenly they came across a sad sight, a shallow wolf's lair. But they didn't need to be afraid of wolves. There were 3 cubs inside, and only one of them was alive. It seemed that some kind of accident had happened to the mother wolf, otherwise she would never have left her cubs to starve. Apparently, she left one day and didn't come back. And Victor knew that the wolf would never abandon her cubs. It was a heartbreaking sight, and Mila was very saddened, but Olga was determined to save the 3rd cub. So they picked him up and took him home. They knew that their son would be extremely worried to find out that his daughter was near a wolf, regardless of its age and size. So they made little Mila promise that it would be their common secret. It seems that this time Victor had to build a wolf bed. He also went in search of the mother wolf in case she got into trouble somewhere and could still be saved, but they never found her. As expected, Mila and the little wolf cub quickly became attached to each other. She loved feeding him, and despite her grandparents' warnings that he was a wild animal that would one day have to return to freedom, she still adored him, and the feeling was mutual. He always followed her everywhere. It was almost like having a puppy, but not really. He grew up quickly and soon began to show his predatory instincts, but Mila was not afraid. She helped his grandparents take care of him, and later taught him how to hunt and look for food. Over the years, when Mila came to visit them, he always appeared around, even when he eventually joined the wild pack. At first he came to play, and then he just hid in the bushes and left when he saw Mila. The next summer, the whole family came to visit, and they had good news. Mila would soon become an older sister. Her mother was pregnant. Everyone was so excited that another joyful lump joined their pack. Olga had already started knitting a new plaid for the baby, when they suddenly received terrible news. Their son called them, and they immediately realized from his voice that something very serious had happened. There was a terrible accident. Mila and her mother were returning home from a shopping trip for the unborn baby when someone ran over them. Their car overturned and they were locked in the cabin for a while. The daughter-in-law of her son and the child she was carrying died without getting out of the car. Mila was eventually rescued, but she was in a very bad condition. Despite the fear of going to the city, Victor and Olga realized that there are things more important than fears. They packed up and took the train to the city. The trip was worth it. When their son burst into tears in their arms, he was glad that they had come. Mila looked so small and weak on the snow-white hospital bed. When she opened her eyes, she smiled when she saw them, but then reality flooded over her, and shadows darkened the face of their sweet girl. She didn't want to talk about the accident or about her mom, who stopped talking while they were still locked in the car. She was severely injured, and worse, she was also paralyzed. She had terrible injuries, but after a while she had to start walking again. Doctors believed that the paralysis was caused by the trauma she had suffered, and if her mental state had improved, she might have been able to walk again. But it seemed that this best space was far beyond her reach. After the funeral, Olga and Victor stayed with her as long as they could, but they could not leave the farm forever. Their friends looked after her, but after a month of staying, they had to leave. Mila begged to take her with him, but her father did not want this. He needed the comfort of his daughter's presence. He was only thinking about his pain. not about Mila's recovery or how much she loved the farm. It didn't matter how hard they tried to convince him or how sweetly she begged, and she stayed at home. He was angry at his parents for not supporting him, and for several months after that he refused to let her go to them, even making up excuses if they wanted to visit him. A year after the accident, he simply informed them that he had remarried. This news came as a big shock to the parents. They did not even know that he was interested in someone, and could not help but wonder how Mila took this news. Was the girl ready for a new woman to take her mother's place? But their son wouldn't even let them talk to her, said they needed time to adapt, and she still wasn't walking. It broke their hearts not to be able to be with her when she needed them so much, but there was nothing they could do about it. But the situation took an even more dramatic turn a few months later. Victor and Olga spent the whole day sorting things out, and did not see what shocking events unfolded on their farm. Mila's stepmother was tired of the fact that a girl was constantly sad in the house, whom she was not obliged to take care of. She was tired of being held back by this girl in a wheelchair. This is not at all what she expected when marrying a rich man with an already grown child. She thought she would spend her days shopping, playing the role of a cheerful stepmother, but there was not a drop of fun in this girl, and it was such a burden to drag her to the shops. She just wanted to get rid of her. After another screaming fight, Mila told her that if she took her to her grandparents' farm, she would never see her again. This terrible woman decided that this was a brilliant plan, and since her husband was on a business trip, it was the right time to carry out his plan. He'll understand when he gets back. She packed up all of Mila's things, loaded her into the car that same day, and they set off towards the forest. There was no one at the farm, but the stepmother didn't care. She wasn't going to take Mila with her anymore. She pulled the girl and all her belongings out of the car and just left them there, not caring a bit about Mila's safety. As far as they knew, the grandparents could have gone away for a long time, but the stepmother left her paralyzed lizard all alone in the forest. What she also didn't know was that one wolf had noticed her and was about to do something amazing. Mila didn't care that her stepmother wanted to get rid of her. It meant that she finally ended up on a farm where she really wanted to be. She decided to go and sit in a quiet forest while she waited for her grandparents. She set off down the familiar path to the stream in her wheelchair. The only problem was that the wheels were designed for city streets and houses, and not for forest soil. Almost immediately, the chair got stuck, and she had to make great efforts to pull it out. She was tired and hadn't even walked half the way, but there was a descent ahead. However, then she started to pick up speed and couldn't stop herself. The chair crashed into the stone below, and she flew out of it. She was left lying injured and unable to reach the chair. Then she suddenly heard the sound of branches breaking, and a bear came out of the forest. She was scared to death. The bear sniffed and began to approach her. Mila was sure she looked like the easiest prey he could come across. She tried her best to stay still, and her heart was pounding like crazy. Then, out of nowhere, a wolf jumped out between them and growled, followed by his entire pack from the forest. The bear quickly realized that he was going to lose this fight. Mila breathed a sigh of relief when she saw the bear retreat. But then she noticed that the other wolves were approaching her, and realized that she was still in mortal danger. However, the first wolf growled loudly at the pack, and they stopped in place. What was going on? She wondered why this wolf was so determined to protect her. But at this time, she noticed a strange detail. This wolf looked extremely familiar. She was sure she had seen those amber eyes before. Was this the same wolf cub she had raised as a child? She didn't have to wonder for long if it was really him. The wolf nuzzled her battered body, and the tail wagged as she ran her fingers through his fur. It really was her old friend. He recognized her and came to her aid when she needed it most. But she didn't just need help because of the bear. She was beside herself with mental pain, and so far no one has been able to break down the wall behind which she hid after losing her mother. Did he know how deep her pain was? She would never know, but for some reason his gentle kindness broke down that wall, and suddenly she burst into tears, for the first time since she lost her mother and future brother or sister. She was in such shock and denial that she couldn't shed a tear, but clinging to this huge wild wolf, she soaked its fur with tears. Meanwhile, Victor and Olga returned home, realized that Mila was supposed to be there, and began to look for her, and that's how they found her, hugging a wolf and crying. The pack left as soon as they heard the people, and even their wolf moved aside, as if making sure that the grandparents would look after her before leaving them. Mila looked up and realized that she needed their loving hugs too, so she got to her feet and walked over to them. It was only when they gasped in shock that she realized she was walking. Her grandparents hugged her tightly, and they all cried with joy. She was finally where she needed to be, surrounded by people who loved her. About a week later, her father suddenly appeared. His parents were furious. He was a terrible father when his daughter needed him the most. But he knew it himself. He also realized that he had entered into a new marriage too hastily, and when he found out what his new wife had done to his daughter, he kicked her out of the house. When he saw Mila walking, he felt even more guilty for keeping her away from him. Mila refused to leave, and everyone expected him to resist again, but they were shocked by what he said, that he was ready to return to live on the farm to be near his daughter and parents. He realized that his child needed it. And to be honest, life in the city has become too painful for him too. Fortunately, he still had a loving family who were willing to wait until he realized everything himself and take him back as soon as he was ready. They will take care of him and Mila and slowly heal the pain in their hearts with love. And somewhere in the forest, they knew that a wolf was also watching over them. What a wonderful story. How would you react if you found out that your significant other sent your child somewhere alone? Have you ever burst into tears after some unusual event that awakened your emotions? Tell us in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.